Welcome to the Career Matters podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. I am the founder and editor of the blog careermatters.com, and this is episode 23 of the Career Matters podcast, and this episode is part of the Expert series. And for today, for the Career Expert series episode, I'm interviewing Vicki Aubin, the Rockin Career Coach. Vicki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Nisar. I'm really excited to be here.
I must start off by saying that I have seen some of your videos and some of your content. Great stuff, very informative.
Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on board here on the podcast so you can share your wisdom. But for the benefit of the listeners, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, Vicki.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to, and welcome to everybody who's listening in today, too. So my name is Vicki Aubin, otherwise known as the Rockin Career Coach, and I help career revolutionaries unleash their inner rock star, as I like to say, and reinvent themselves. So what does that mean exactly? So basically, I'm a career transition and personal branding consultant, and I help aspiring career transitioners who are desperate to transition to a new career that they love, that fires them up inside, that really matches their juiciest talent, skills, and strengths, but who don't really have any idea how the heck or where the heck to get started to even begin such a transition. So I kind of act as their transition co-pilot. I help them to identify their greatest marketable skills and strengths, help them understand how to position themselves and market themselves really powerfully to recruiters and employers at first impression, because you only have one first impression, and help them be successful in transitioning to a new career that they love. And basically through that process, they're also gaining new skills and strengths that will last with them for a lifetime so they can navigate their careers with confidence going forward.
First of all, where are you calling from? Which city are you calling from?
Sure. So I'm actually just outside of New York City in New Jersey.
Oh, perfect. I can guarantee there's not a lot of people here who do not know where New York City is. However, I would like to hear from you since you're from there.
Mm-hmm.
What is something interesting or what is a fun fact about the city?
Ooh, a fun fact about the city. I think and I've actually been in the New York City area for a long time now. And I think the thing that I just enjoyed the most about it is that it's always awake. It is the city that never sleeps. And it's just incredibly diverse. And I love that about the city. So this is really the place to come if you want to see a representative of every culture, every individual in the world. It's an amazing place to be. There's so much culture and art and cuisine, and it's just really a great place to be. It's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like the one place where you can kind of see the rest of the world in one location.
That's you know what, I totally agree with that because I've been there a few times in my life.
Oh, fantastic.
And I've always enjoyed it. And I've asked anyone I've met, and anybody who's been to New York, I'm yet to meet someone who doesn't love the city. So I can imagine living there would be much more awesome. So now going back to your introduction, you said you're a career transition coach. Mm-hmm. One thing I love to hear is from my guests is how they got started. How from where they were before to where they are now, and I would love to hear your story. How did you become this Rockin Career Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to share that. So not only have I been a recruiter, a former headhunter, and HR professional, I've actually been a career transitioner myself several times. So I definitely understand the trials and tribulations that my clients are going through as they are facing this big career transition in front of them. So basically, I started my own career actually in the music industry here in New York. And I held various roles over a period of about 7 years. I was in college radio promotions, music conference management, and record label operations. And then my career just sort of took a detour, and I actually ended up in human resources and recruiting in the financial services field. Wasn't a direction that I had planned to go in. But I saw it as a new opportunity in which I was going to learn a lot. And I was at some, pretty top global companies like Goldman Sachs and Deloitte and Touche. And my most recent role in the HR and recruiting realm was as a campus recruiter at Morgan Stanley in New York for their sales and trading division. So all really great experiences. Even my experiences as an executive headhunter together combined over the years really helped me see career development and career transitions from the perspective of both the job seeker and the recruiter. And after many years of being in that field, I guess you could say I kind of had a itch for many years inside of me about potentially stepping out on my own and becoming a coach and working with job seekers one-on-one to help them launch their careers. In 2000, goodness now, what year is it? 2012, I think it was, that I actually decided it's now or never. So I made that leap. I left the corporate world, and that's when I begun my career consulting practice. And I love what I do. I love really helping individuals, kind of achieve their goals and have a career that fulfills them, because our careers are a huge part of our lives, right? We spend a great deal of our waking hours at our jobs, in our careers. Mm-hmm. And I believe that life is short. You only have one, so you should have a career that rocks. So that's how I'm the Rockin Career Coach. So that's my mission.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the name, so thanks for covering that. It's a great, it's a very catchy title, right? The Rockin Career Coach.
Yes.
So
yes. And
it stands out.
And actually, it's kind of also because of my music industry background too. I've always been a lifelong lover of music. Music is a huge passion of mine. It's been a huge part of my life, both as a fan and as a musician myself. So I've kind of tried to combine career development, personal branding, and my love of music all in one.
That sounds perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story. I always love to hear that because it reveals a lot. One common thread I find, Vicki, is usually the guests, the career experts I interview, they started using their own personal experience, and now they share it with others, and now they made it a career or a business. Mm-hmm. So that's perfect.
Thank you.
So I'd like to get into the interview, and you mentioned that you help a lot of individuals with career transition. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming there are a lot of challenges they come to you with. But what would you say would be some of the biggest challenges that job seekers, your clients, come to you for?
Sure. So sometimes they definitely have kind of like an inner voice, a gut instinct, a passion that's kind of telling them what they want to do, what they know they want to do. But sometimes they're just not even sure if they can do it. Do they have the right skills and strengths required to make this transition successfully? And even more so than that, I would probably say the biggest challenge facing a lot of aspiring career transitioners is, what are my transferable skills and strengths? What can I bring to the table that will make me stand out over other people who have perhaps already been in a similar type of functional role or in this field before? So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And the third thing out of those three items that I mentioned would be kind of lack of confidence or clarity as to, okay, well, I know what my marketable skills and strengths are now, but how the heck do I present that and communicate that to employers in a way that's going to capture and hold their attention?
I think that's very common. Even myself, I've been in that position. So when they are in this position and they come to you, what is the first thing that you recommend them change? Is it something like is it their resume, or is it their mindset that you help them change first?
Actually, I love that question, and I'm glad you asked that because mindset is definitely the foundation of everything I do. Because if you can't believe that you can do it, guess what? You're not going to do it. So you really have to have that belief in yourself. So as I begin working with the client, one of the first things that we do is we sit down, and it's kind of like a, personal branding power session. And we kind of excavate, what is everything that they've done in their career so far? What's the range of skills and strengths that they've been using across various fields or different types of positions or titles. And through that process, a lot of the times it's interesting because people will realize that they have so many more skills and strengths to offer that they either didn't realize they didn't realize would be valuable to the new industry they want to be in, or that they actually even forgot that that maybe they had used in a job some years ago. So it's actually pretty interesting. I see that as kind of like a common challenge. And so, yes, one of the first things is actually sitting down and really helping them, like I said, excavate, what's that portfolio of skills and strengths and experiences that they have to bring to an employer. And from there, we begin kind of, crafting their new personal brand, which then we will apply to their resume and then their cover letter and their LinkedIn profile to start with.
I think it sounds like it's very effective because you're doing something like an inside-out approach, right? You're identifying someone's strength,
mm-hmm.
at the same time, what value they can bring to an employer. So I think it helps them create a good match, doesn't it? What they have and what a particular employer is seeking.
Oh goodness, yeah. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I actually see career transitioners or even just job seekers in general making is that they send out resumes or cover letters or what have you, but they're in no way, catering to the position at hand or what the position's about. And that's the easiest way to have your resume fall into that dreaded black hole that everybody talks about, the resume black hole. Where has my resume gone? So yes, and having been a recruiter and a headhunter and knowing how they assess candidates and knowing that they only look at a resume for, I think the average is like 6 seconds, but 10, maybe 10 seconds at most, a person will typically look at a resume before they decide its fate. It's really important that first impression is as strong as possible.
Thanks for talking about the resume black hole, and
mm-hmm.
You mentioned the 6 seconds. So that's a great transition to my next question. So you help people craft that great resume, but you have also been on the other side
mm-hmm.
where you were a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
So according to you, what would some of the recommendations or tips be for candidates to really spice up their resume and make it stand out?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. That's a great question. So first off, and this is a big mistake people make, successful job seekers and career transitioners really pay close attention to what is written in the job description. I can't stress that enough. So really reading it thoroughly and understanding what exactly would I be doing in this role? What are the skills and experience that would qualify me for this role, et cetera, and then keeping those keywords, phrases, concepts in mind as you're crafting or editing your resume or cover letter. So that's one thing, and I kind of call that relevance. So that would be the first thing is relevance. Your resume has to be relevant to the job description and what they're looking for in that particular role. One particular reason for that is especially these days, we have the internet. We didn't always have that. We didn't have the internet when I started my career, believe it or not. But now we do, and because of that, it's made the job search process more challenging because of the internet. There's so many more people now that have access to apply for new jobs than did in the past. So there is much more competition because of the web and technology and how it's grown. Things move much more quickly, I would say, in the recruiting realm. So, and because of those things, and because of the short time that recruiters have to fill roles, when I talk about relevance, search engine optimization is really critical to a resume. So your content has to be relevant to what's in the job description, and in order to have your resume be ranked higher on LinkedIn than it might have been before, for your resume to even be seen by a recruiter. So I would probably say relevance in those different ways is kind of the number one thing. And then just in addition to that, just from a general resume perspective, resumes have to have impact versus just having bullets that kind of list what you did. It's really critical that your resume shows the impact and the results of what you have done in those roles. Given that you did X, what's the Y that resulted from it? So that's really critical too, because employers don't want just somebody who has a certain background or skills. They want to know that they're hiring the person who has made a difference in where they've been, and they can come in and make a difference for their company now.
So Vicki, thanks for covering all the different aspects of the resume, and it's good to talk about the resume black hole. That is something that is really frustrating for a lot of candidates, including myself when I was in the job search process. One thing personally, I get a lot of confusion because there's a lot of different thoughts, and I'm sure the people listening to this want to know as well, is the topic of cover letters.
Yes.
There are so many different answers. So I wanted to ask your opinion. What do you think of cover letters? First of all, are they important?
Sure, and actually I'm really glad we're talking about this, because this is definitely a hot topic, a controversial question for sure. If you were to ask 5 different people, are cover letters important, you'd probably get 5 different answers. So I'm going to give you my take on them, and my straight answer to that is yes, they're crucial. And the reason why I say that is for a couple of main reasons. Number one, your resume on its own, its job is to tell a potential employer what you've done, right? But that's a very limited picture of you as a whole, who you are, what you're about, what's driving you. So in other words, your resume is kind of giving just a one-dimensional view of you. And that's where the cover letter comes in. The cover letter, I like to look as the resume is the what, but the cover letter is the who and the why. The cover letter is there to communicate just who are you as a person. Why are you so interested in this role at this company? What's driving you? And really, it's there to kind of really give them I like to say, I guess, 3-dimensional or HD picture of you as a whole, and telling them the story that the resume can't on its own. And another thing I just want to mention here too is that having been a recruiter, if a recruiter has, let's say, 10 equal resumes, every individual has similar qualifications and background and academics. Let's say they're all theoretically on paper equally qualified. But let's say the recruiter can only bring in, 5 of them for actual interviews. So how the heck are they going to decide which 5 to bring in if they all look equal on paper? So this is where the cover letter comes in. And if you write a very compelling, impactful cover letter that tells the story of who you are and why you really want this job so much, and most of all, why you are the individual who can make the biggest contribution to the company and how you can do that, that's going to tell a potential employer a couple of very important things. Number one, the fact that you wrote the cover letter tells them that you are very serious about this role. You're genuinely interested in it. You are a go-getter. You're somebody who does what it takes to make things happen. You have the professional courtesy to provide them with a cover letter to tell them more about yourself as an individual. And it really makes an individual strongly distinguish themselves and stand out from individuals who did not include a cover letter with their resume. So that's kind of just the beginning of the topic, but those are kind of some of the key things that I feel make a cover letter really critical.
One thing that stood out for me as you were mentioning about cover letters is how you broke it down. The resume is the what, and the cover letter is the who or why. And I think that, if anything, we have discussed so far so many great points. That really stands out for me.
Thank you.
Because, and you're correct, I think, when, for example, if they get 5 identical resumes, your cover letter could be the deciding factor that pushes you out, makes you stand out. Okay, interesting. So now we have covered the importance of cover letter. Do you have or do you recommend some type of structure, like what it needs to have in the cover letter? I understand it needs to have the who and why, but for example, how long it should be, 1 page, 2 page, how many words, how many paragraphs, any ideas or recommendations?
Sure. So I believe it should be 1 page. And for the simple purpose that recruiters have very little time on their hands, and since the average amount of time that they're spending scanning your resume is probably no more than 10 seconds, imagine what they're going to do with your cover letter. So, and really, if you think of it like this, if the cover letter is the first thing that they're going to open and look at, you really need to capture and hold their attention within a couple of seconds. So I do have a particular strategy that I like to take around cover letters. I believe probably 4 to 5 paragraphs is sufficient. And with the first paragraph being kind of an introduction of you, the candidate, the position you're applying for, where you found out about the position. If you were referred by somebody for the position, that should be mentioned there as well. And then the next sentence in there, I think, is the most important one out of the whole cover letter, and that's where you very briefly describe the combined skills, experience, etc. that you have that you feel makes you the best candidate for this role. So that's the first paragraph. After that, I kind of like to call it the passion paragraph. This is where it's your opportunity to really forge a connection with the individual reading it. So if you have a particular, let's say, connection to an employer, let's say you've been a follower of theirs for years. Let's say you're a user of their products or services and have been so for years. Let's say you have a particular story that makes you feel connected to this organization. Perhaps you really admire or respect them for something that they've done, or they intrigue you for some reason or another. This is really an opportunity for you to really get personal and share that with the interviewer. And sharing something personal, it's going to capture and hold their attention. It's going to show them that you're not somebody else who's just writing another bland, boring cover letter, because unfortunately most of them are. So this is another chance for you to really distinguish yourself by sharing kind of the motivation behind what's driving you to apply for this job. The next paragraph, I kind of like to call it as the meat per se of the cover letter, and that's where you'd give specific examples of things that you've done that are similar to or mirror what would be done in this particular role based on the job description. And then from there, you could have just a closing line thanking them, stating that you're very interested in the role and you'd love the opportunity to discuss it with them further along with your contact details, and then the closing. So that's, I think, is a very standard and strong foundation for a cover letter.
Perfect. Thanks for breaking that down. And my favorite, of course, is the passion paragraph, right? And
yes.
I think people love to hear about themselves. And if I was on the other line and someone sent me an email or a cover letter and they mentioned why they are attached to the company, of course, I'm going to pay attention. So I think that's like a good, in copywriting, they call it the hook, right? It's like, why should somebody,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why should somebody keep reading? So that's perfect.
Great.
Great. So far, Steve, we have covered the resume, the cover letter. So a recruiter has seen your resume, cover letter. The next step is the interview. They call you in for an interview.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So this is the part which is what everybody wants, but it's also the part where everybody is very, very nervous about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So before we go into what do you recommend, I want to ask you in your world, in the time when you were a recruiter, what are some of the things that what are some of the mistakes candidates made that immediately disqualified them? I hate to start off on a negative, but I wanted to hear your perspective because you were on the other side interviewing candidates.
Yes. And I'm actually glad you asked that question because I think it's important to talk about these types of things. Definitely. So what are some mistakes I've seen people make? Sure. So one of the first mistakes, honestly, since we just came off of the topic, are generic, bland, boring cover letters that have not been customized at all for the particular position. That's the biggest mistake you can make, especially if you forget to change the name of the company that you're referring to in the cover letter. That's kind of instant disqualification. So customization of the cover letter is crucial. Aside from that, I would say, it also kind of comes down same to the resume. I've met job seekers at different networking events or workshops or things, and they'll come up to me and say, Vicki, I wanna do X role, or I want to transition to X type of company, but I'm getting no responses. What am I doing wrong? And I say, let me take a look at your resume. And instantly I know, because there's nothing in their resume that is really relevant to the type of position that they're pursuing. From general responsibilities and especially keywords, which we kind of talked about earlier too. Your resume has to be relevant, and I like to say, speak the language of your audience. Speak to the job description, speak the language of what you'd actually be doing in this role. Your resume has to mirror that as much as you've, actually done those things. Of course, we want to be 100% truthful in a resume, but that's critical. And then I would even add one other thing, which is actually LinkedIn. There are so many people who have completely incomplete LinkedIn profiles. People who don't check their LinkedIn email inbox. People who are just missing content in their LinkedIn profile. And when I was a headhunter, I was on LinkedIn day in and day out from 9 to 5. And when I would do a search for candidates based on certain keywords or qualifications, guess what? The people whose profiles were bare, I would never see them because otherwise, how would I know that they had those skills? Or sometimes I would try and reach out to somebody, but if there was no way for me to contact them, and if they never checked their LinkedIn inbox, guess what? They missed out on a potentially great career opportunity. So I would say those are probably three of the biggest things.
Yeah, it's thanks for bringing up LinkedIn, because it sounds like, based on your answer, every recruiter does look at LinkedIn, even though if you have a good cover letter or a resume. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I would say so, because that's the place to go to connect with professionals. And people want to see, okay, well, this person has this on their resume, but let's see what their LinkedIn says. And the other reason is because, as you know, on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn, on a resume, you just have 1 or 2 pages, right? But for LinkedIn, you kind of have limitless space. So there are many things you can fit into your LinkedIn profile, additional things about yourself that you might not be able to fit into a resume. And you can really take a great advantage of LinkedIn that way. So, yes, recruiters will definitely check your LinkedIn, even to see, is it consistent with your resume? Are there additional details about you that could even perhaps make you even more of a valuable candidate? And even on LinkedIn, as you know, there you have the opportunity to have people submit recommendations of you in your work. That's huge too. That's definitely one thing that stands out to recruiters in a very positive way as well.
Okay, got it. So LinkedIn, resume, cover letter,
Mm-hmm.
you got it all packaged, you got the call, you go in for the interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're finally sitting across the table or across a panel of hiring managers.
Mm-hmm.
What are your recommendations in terms of how they should how the candidates should put themselves forward in an interview?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes, interviews are a very sticky question because your resume can get your foot in the door, but the interview is where it really happens, right? It's the interview where they'll make you a job offer or not. So it's just as critical, I would say, even if not more critical than your resume. So a few things for interviews, and it some of the strategies follow similarly to resumes and cover letters, but I'll definitely say that, again, it's really about knowing your audience and being able to speak their language. You really need to be able to go into an interview really understanding the company, who they are, what they do, what drives them, and what drives you? What's your motivation to want to work at this company? What are the specific skills and strengths that you can offer that will make a strong and immediate contribution to this company? And also just, being very, like we talked about, speaking their language, being well prepared in terms of being ready for potential questions that might come up. And a large part of it comes from really very closely reading the job description, which I think a lot of people miss out on. The job description is like your best friend. And if you study it thoroughly, understand what the role is about, therefore you know the types of things you should be ready to talk about from your background. And again, just understanding the company, what they're about, and just really knowing your motivation and your reason for wanting to be at that company is critical, because in the end, and I always say this, is that companies aren't looking to hire resumes. They're looking to hire people, right? Because they don't work with a resume, they work with a person. So that's why they ask different types of questions. And that's why you really showing them that you are serious, genuinely interested, driven, and motivated to succeed at their organization, make an impact, and that you're just enthusiastic and excited about doing so, because companies don't just want a person who can do the job. They want the person who wants to do the job for them.
Interesting. So going back to the relevance, I think that's like a common theme, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to make sure that your interview is relevant. So you mentioned enthusiasm, and that's something I haven't heard a lot about for interviews, because interviews, most advice out there is about preparation, mm-hmm. Answer all the questions, be professional. Mm-hmm. So when you said enthusiasm, are you could you expand on that, because it's like a fresh idea I'm hearing. So could you expand on that?
Yes, I would love to. I think this is something that is completely overlooked, but it's one of the most critical things to helping you win a job offer. Just kind of going back to the fact that, and I know I've sat in interviews, interviewed candidates, and they answered the questions, but that was it. There was no personality, no drive, no motivation, no smiles, no anything. Why the heck would I want to hire that person? What would make me think that that person is motivated or driven and wants to come in every day to do a great job at this company, right? So that's just kind of to give you a beginning kind of look at enthusiasm. But enthusiasm is critical. I know a lot of people say, oh, I get very nervous before interviews. I feel like I can't be myself. But actually, the interview is really the place where you want to allow yourself to be yourself, because after all, it's you, yourself, the real person. That's who's going to be doing the day-to-day work with your colleagues at the organization if you get the offer. So it really is about, being yourself and not feeling like you have to be somebody else. And I think if you prepare thoroughly, and kind of taking into account some of the strategies we just discussed before about preparation, if you prepare well, you can be yourself. And lastly, I just want to add one thing to that too, is you really, you want to be picky when you're applying for jobs, and ideally you should be excited about the types of positions that you're applying for. So when you go in for the interview, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to be fake, right? Recruiters can tell that too, by the way. They definitely can, by how you answer questions, by your mannerisms, by lots of things, verbal and nonverbal communication. But if you're generally really excited and enthusiastic about a particular role, that's naturally going to come out in your energy, in your whole vibe, in your presence. And that's really what captures and holds their attention, like we talked about before. They want somebody who wants to come into this company every day and do a great job, somebody who's enthusiastic about that. Because that means you're going to be a productive worker, right? And if you're productive and you feel challenged and you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to thrive. And you're not only going to develop yourself further, you're going to help the company. And that's really what enables people to move forward more quickly in their careers is ideally, doing something that you enjoy, doing something that you're motivated to do every day.
So, Vicki, thanks for covering that. And there was a reason I asked that question, mm-hmm. and you answered that before me. I asked that follow-up question because as you mentioned, interviews are nerve-wracking, right? No matter mm-hmm. how many times you've done it, yeah. You're always nervous. And even like sometimes you feel robotic as a candidate. You have to go in, you have to answer those questions. But I think the key ingredient, as you mentioned, if I can summarize or repeat what you just said, is if you apply for the job or the industry you're excited about, you don't necessarily, it doesn't come across as impersonal, right? So, mm-hmm. so I think it's you're talking about not necessarily enthusiasm, but natural enthusiasm, some excitement and passion about what you're going to do, rather than jumping up and like a cheerleader type of enthusiasm. Okay. So that makes total sense. Thanks for covering that.
Yeah, because I really believe that, you have one life, you shouldn't settle, you should have a great career as part of that, something you really enjoy.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So now the final question in this whole process, we have followed a process from resume, cover letter, LinkedIn to interviews. And this is something as an ex-recruiter, maybe you can help us out here. You mentioned the resume black hole. What about the post-interview black hole? You go through the interview. Yeah. you know what I'm talking about,
I do.
Right? So you go to the interview. You have a great interview. You feel good about it. Then they said they'll get back to you, and then nothing happens. Or what happens? Why would that be? First of all, why would that be? And second of all, what can a candidate do?
Sure. I think this is a great topic of conversation. So first off, why does that happen? Well, sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. That's kind of a black hole in itself, like you mentioned. But there could be a number of different reasons why you might not hear back. Number one, depending on the company, each company has very different internal hiring processes. They may, one company may be looking to fill a position sooner versus later. One company may perhaps have a longer timeline and want to expand their look at more candidates before they make a hiring decision. Sometimes it even comes down to, let's say that there are a couple of people who are the key decision makers in whether or not this individual gets an offer. And let's say if those individuals are away on business or on vacation, that can even delay things by weeks sometimes. If the key players who have to say the yes or the no are away, that can delay things also. People don't realize, it could be really a number of different circumstances that could delay things. Could be that they found somebody internally, perhaps, that they felt fit the role. But what it really comes down to, and I think your answer was, why is it that you wouldn't hear back? And I have to say, it's unfortunate that a candidate wouldn't hear back at all, because personally, I feel that this is a courtesy that should be extended. But unfortunately, these days, that is not all common, I'm sorry to say. So unfortunately, no, candidates aren't always given the courtesy of some sort of, update or notification as to where their candidacy stands. But this puts us right into question number 2 from you, which is, what can you do about it? So these days, because the job market, it's so fast moving, the recruiting world is so fast moving, and there are so many more other candidates in the pipeline too as well. There's a bigger competitive landscape as a job seeker. And because of that, you really do need to look at your job search and especially interviews. You really need to look at this as something that you are proactively managing and steering. It's not something that you can look at as being a passive passenger, I guess you could say. You really need to take the steering wheel, per se, get in the driver's seat, and really steer how and where your job search is going. So if you're within a specific amount of time, as was stated, then you absolutely want to follow up. And you want to follow up until you get an answer, ideally. Of course, with the right, types of communication, so you still stay very, very positive in their minds as a potential candidate, whether they give you the offer or not. But I think it's important. You definitely want to know, where do you stand, right, in this particular opportunity, so you can manage expectations in that and in the rest of your search if you're looking at various positions at once, which most people are.
Perfect. Thanks for covering that, because it's a common frustration, right? Especially if you have done all the right things as you mentioned, like resume, LinkedIn, cover letter, interviews, then you go into this black hole.
Yes.
So the thing I'm taking away from is you as a candidate, you should be proactive. You should follow up, and one other thing is sometimes it's also themselves. Sometimes the recruiters or the hiring managers do not have the courtesy. So it's a combination of both.
Right.
So thanks. So far, we have covered a lot of topics, and if the audience after listening to this, wanted to get in touch with you, Vicki, what would be the best way or best ways to reach you?
Sure. Well, my website is at therockincareercoach.com. And actually, if they go there, there's a link on the contact page where they can message me. They can email me directly from there. And I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all those platforms. And I do have a Facebook page as well, the Rockin Career Coach as well.
Perfect. Thanks. We're coming to the final point at the end of the interview here. Mm-hmm. Before we sign off or conclude, Vicki, do you have any last words?
Last words. Yes, I do. And just to kind of reiterate some of the things that I had mentioned not too long ago is that your career touches every single part of your life. What you do for work, it impacts every other part of your life, not just financially. We all know that. That's a big factor, but every other way as well. If you're in a job that's not a match for you, you're miserable in it, it's stagnating, guess what? That is going to trickle down to different parts of your life. And that's unfortunate. And it's something to be really mindful of because it's going to have a serious impact. And like I said, we've only got one life, right? One time, one shot at it. And we should make the most of it. You deserve to have not just a job, you deserve a career that rocks, AKA the Rockin Career Coach. So I think, it's really something that everybody should look at as it's something that they have the right to have, but it doesn't just come to you. You have to make it happen. And starting with the mindset and then all the different strategies that we talked about today, you have to make it happen. You have to be the person in the driver's seat of your career. That's where I see many people kind of getting stuck and unfortunately taking detours from dream careers that they had intended to pursue. It's really about being willing to do what it takes to steer your career in the direction that you desire. And that's how you have a rockin' career and a great life.
Vicki, thank you very much for that wonderful summary. That summarizes, and also a great way to close is it is inspirational and motivational to hear as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, on behalf of the audience and myself, thanks for being a guest. You shared a lot of great points. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will also learn a lot from listening to this.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I had a great time, and I hope everybody finds it helpful.
Thanks, folks, for listening to this episode of the Career Menace podcast. I have written a brief summary of the interview with links to Vicki Aubin, the Rockin Career Coach's website. If you liked what you heard, feel free to subscribe to the Career Menace podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. If you enjoyed the episode and also learned something new, feel free to post a comment or a review. And if you loved it, definitely go ahead and share this with your network. Until next time, this is Nisar Ahmed, your host for the Career Menace podcast. Thank you.